All right. Hi, everyone. Hi and hello. Um, I'm Carmen Rios, feminist superstar and AEOO digital director. I'll be your host and moderator tonight. And I'm just very glad that my hair has fully grown out since we recorded that video. Um, and so, thank you to everyone for being here with us tonight, and to our two very special guest speakers who will introduce themselves in just a minute. I also want to give a shout out to a bunch of our team members who are here. We've got our founder, Ricky Gard Diamond, and her partner, Stephen MacArthur, here. Mary Beth Gardam is going to be keeping time behind the scenes. And Ryan is our Zoom maestro and chat aficionado for the night. So keep your eye out in the chat for sort of more links. And if you have questions throughout the conversation that you want to see if we have time to get to at the end, Ryan will keep an eye out for those as well. And if you submitted a question when you registered in Eventbrite, we are going to answer a lot of those during the Q&A. So get ready. Um, so the subject at hand tonight is critical and universal and also just so relevant at this current moment. How can we survive what's happening in this country, and how might we lay the groundwork for a transformative change, the kind that we really need in our communities, the kind that we've needed for so long, um, despite the challenges we face. So if you're new to An Economy of Our Own, we're an alliance of feminist economic activists and organizations grounded in amplifying women's voices and perspectives on economic issues. And we believe that economics, much like politics, is personal. Um, we began organizing this conversation over a month ago. And obviously, today it feels even more pertinent. The far right MAGA movement has taken control of all three branches of our government. Right now, countless government employees are working unpaid or being put on furlough because Republicans refuse to negotiate terms to keep healthcare more affordable for people across the country. It's the latest in a string of incidents that reveal the real costs, economic and human, of the rising tide of fascism in this country. Donald Trump ran for president, obviously, as we all recall, claiming, among many other things, that he would lower prices on everyday essentials. Instead, of course, we've seen that he has invested billions of dollars in expanding ICE and using immigration enforcement officers and the National Guard as his personal police. Him and his cronies have slashed funding for gender based violence, resources and supports, healthcare subsidies, medical research. His administration is tying federal money for education to his political agenda, demanding compliance with the fascist takeover to keep colleges and universities funded. And he's spending our American taxpayer dollars to terrorize our neighborhoods, kidnap and imprison our community members, and punish his political enemies. Not to mention that we also paid for that birthday parade that nobody wanted to go to in the first place. And of course, cherry on top, everything is more expensive thanks to punitive petty tariffs that have been applied to most all goods that we use every day, all of which have been put into place while the president lied through his teeth that consumers wouldn't end up paying the difference. I can go on, but for the sake of this conversation and my heart rate, I will not. Instead, I think we need to turn at this point to what we can control, how we can build community, come together, and take back the future from what we see happening at such a rapid pace right now. So, with that, I'd like to introduce our two guests, Kat Dusterhouse and Sarah Parker. I'm going to start with you, Kat. Katrina, or Kat, is an award winning activist and nationally recognized feminist leader in the 50-51 movement, which stands for 50 protests, 50 states, one day. Kat helped mobilize over 5 million Americans for peaceful protests on April 5th and June 14th by forging partnerships with groups like Indivisible, the Women's March, and others who are working on the front lines. She's also the founder of Bands Off Miami, co-founder of Occupy Florida, and a founding board member of the Miami Coalition to Advance Racial Equity. Welcome, Kat.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. And yeah, most people call me Kat. My full name is Katrina, but please refer to me as Kat. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them. And I didn't get into activism, as like something that was a happy choice for me. I got into it because I had to. It was born really from trauma in my childhood. Like many people, I grew up learning what happens when these systems fail us, when the systems that were meant to protect us don't. I'm a queer disabled survivor who grew up in poverty. And like many other people, I learned that sometimes when you want justice, you have to fight for it for yourself.
Mm.
And so my journey into activism was really very personal. It was first I fought for survivors for survivor justice, pushing laws to eliminate the time limits for prosecuting childhood sexual violence, for a law for tracking rape kits throughout the state of Florida. Laws that require trauma informed police training and protecting kids trapped in unsafe custody situations. And so I approached activism from a very personal angle when I first got involved in it, just out of desperation to try to change the systems that had failed me. But the biggest thing that I learned, as I got into activism really was how all of our struggles are all interconnected. And you cannot understand sexual violence and rape culture without a critical understanding of white supremacy, patriarchy, as well as capitalism. They're all different faces of the same machine. It's the same playbook. And so I started organizing across issues in my community. And some of the work that I've done is local in my Miami community, for housing justice, for racial equity, for reproductive justice. And then in 2023, when the SCOTUS decision overturned Dobbs, we started facing our own fight for reproductive justice in the state of Florida. And in 2023, they passed a near total abortion ban in the state of Florida. And myself and Sarah were on the front lines of that fight as well, getting arrested up in Tallahassee. And, you know, the issues just were really kind of like focused for me here in the state of Florida as one of the testing labs for Project 2025 policies. But when Trump came into office again for the second time, first the shock and the awe and the triggering as a survivor, we have to give a moment of silence for that, for the enormous nationwide trigger that happened there. But after a moment of shock and kind of grief, I got to work, and I started organizing at the national level. I started scaling up because the fight wasn't just here local in our state anymore. It was everybody across the nation was going to be facing the same things that we've been fighting here in for the last 4 or 5 years, with gender affirming care bans, with book bans, with targeted immigration assaults. So I pivoted my Instagram account to focus on national issues and jumped on board with the ERA campaign just before Biden left office. And that was kind of my first dip into national politics. And what I saw there was that some of the, skills and tools that I had learned organizing at the local level, or organizing digital resistance, worked at the national level too. So I started churning out memes and, easy calls to actions on Instagram, and built up a little bit of a creator platform for myself. And, we did manage to move the needle on the ERA. Not enough, but something happened. But that was right around the time that I started seeing calls for 50 protests in 50 states in one day. And so I initially jumped on the 50-51 train as an Instagram creator, amplifying the calls to action, and then got in our back channel, communications, talking with people like Sarah, who we've been organizing, in the states for years, and saying, hey, this call to action is coming. Who can we send, to make sure that it's a safe event? And it's kind of just taken a life of its own. And 50-51 has become a nationwide resistance movement since then. But it really started for me very personal, and then locally, the things that I was seeing in my community happening.
Thank you so much, Kat. It's all such incredible and important work and, such a perfect tie into to this idea that we need to fight a national fight, but we need to fight it together at that local level and at that community level, like we're going to talk about today. So thank you. And now I'm excited to bring Sarah to the virtual stage. Sarah Parker is a passionate advocate for reproductive freedom and social justice in Florida. Sarah is the executive director and president of Voices of Florida, a Black and queer led organization she co founded in 2021 to oppose a proposed 6-week abortion ban in Manatee County. Sarah also co founded Occupy Florida, later known as Occupy Tally, in response to Florida's 2023 abortion ban, and she played a key role in the successful Yes on 4 campaign, ensuring that Floridians could vote to protect abortion rights. Voices of Florida is a national partner of 5051 as well. And in addition, Sarah has spoken at Harvard and Yale about ballot initiatives and the fight to save abortion rights. So, welcome, Sarah, and I'd love to have you offer us sort of a similar introduction in your own words of, what lead you here tonight? What's been your activist journey to this work?
Yeah, thank you so much. I really want to call attention to this moment because I listened to what you were saying, Carmen, and how everything is just, excuse my French for lack of better words, fucked. Um, and I had to like think to myself a week ago, and I was like, like I felt hopeless. But one thing that I understand is like you can feel hopeless in this moment, but you're not helpless. And I think that this
Mhm.
call really is going to surround that, right? Like hopeless is a thought, it's a mind control, right? But helplessness, that's a lie. And I think like that's really like thinking about that and digesting that recently. Like I was looking at the questions and I was like, what was the moment that I woke up one day and I was like, I'm an activist, right? And then
Mhm.
what was the moment that I woke up and I was like, I'm an organizer, because those are two different things. And I could tell you like when I was in school, I went and collected quarters for the animal shelter. Hindsight, I did spend some of them on honey buns, but I was only in second grade. But, I wanted to do something, right? So, after that, I just did what was right. And I was talking recently to someone. I was like, I've always just been what's right and what's wrong, what's right and what's wrong, right? And I was raised in a very Christian home. The first time I ever heard about Planned Parenthood, I was told all of the lies that were pushed into the Black community, right? That like they were there to kill Black babies. And then, I really believed that until I was about 19, 20, and I started seeing my friends that were very close to me have to make these decisions. And some weren't hard. Like, let's be very clear. Like, these decisions aren't always hard. And I was like, well, how can I be a good friend? And I remember bringing my friend over a teddy bear and chocolates and was like, congratulations, and at that moment, I was like, okay, I'm going to fight for this. Like, this is actually someone's deeply personal choice. And so about 20 years old, I wanted to do a protest to protest against the anti-abortion people outside of Planned Parenthood. And actually, like my very good friend who was the campaign manager of Yes on 4, Lauren Brinzel, like texted me and was like, do not do that. And I was like, I could do what I want. I wound up not actually doing it, right? And we wound up not connecting for years on until recently, probably last 3 years that we connected again. And we went back and looked at our messages and it was really cute. So like when after that moment, we started fighting and the Manatee County abortion ban came about. And I was already doing BLM. I was already marching in the streets. I was doing like different housing rights, tenant unions. I've always done a backpack drive. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that story. If I wish I had a pencil. I think that's the title of it, or if I had a pencil. And that always resonated with me because I grew up really poor.
Mm.
And I'm always about giving back to my community. And like I think about the times that like I have ADHD and I would always lose my pencil, right? And like how I would be treated in definitely poor schools, it was like I was already failing, even though I was intelligent and wickedly smart, right? But as a Black woman, as a Black girl, you're often told to be quiet, sit down. If you mess up, it's like the end of the world. And activism kind of broke me out of that too. So as I started kind of trying to find my own path, I didn't want to join a group. I finally joined BLM after like 6 years of not wanting to join any kind of group. BLM cornered me like 3 times and was like, Sarah. And I was like, no. And they're like, Sarah. And I was like, no, I want to be my own person. And eventually last time I was like, yeah. And I got an amazing mentor. And then I got a phone call and they were like, we're going to, can you help me with the protest? And I was like, one protest, that's it. I'm going to work on my mutual aid projects. That one protest has led me to this point in time that I'm an executive director of a nonprofit that was never in like my, like I was going to school to be a paralegal and then a lawyer. It's been the craziest path. And oftentimes the best leaders come from moments that you don't choose. Like a lot of us, I'm assuming, you know, we didn't really choose this path. It wasn't like we woke up one day, we're like, we're going to work for the nonprofit industrial complex. It's just like, we're going to be activists. Now we're organizers. Now we have to organize the organizers. And like, it becomes this whole journey, right? And after, you know, we protested, we actually won. And everyone was so shocked that we had won. Like the local Planned Parenthood affiliate, everyone's like, because everyone else had to give it up. And we're like, no, we're hammering this in and we're not going to let this go. And so we won against the Manatee County 6-week abortion ban. And at that moment in time, I got a call from executive director of the Planned Parenthood affiliate at the time. And she's like, hey, do you guys want to go to Tallahassee? And I was like, what's in Tallahassee? And she's like, you can go up there and talk to legislators. And I was like, oh, and I thought you had to be invited, right? Like Congress, like that was my idea. And this kind of goes into like the direct democracy portion of like why I'm so passionate about speaking on panels. I've spoken on panels across the country. And one of the things is I say all the time is that like people are smart enough to think for themselves. We have to give them back their voice. They have autonomy. And you need to recognize that autonomy in that moment. And I think we always fail, right? We're like, you have to vote this way. But just telling someone like me that didn't know, because no one taught me, that I could just go up to Tallahassee, I can go up to legislators and I could testify against bills, really changed the game. Eventually we got a phone call to be on Yes on 4. We were the smallest grassroots organization that's on Yes on 4. I was one of the only Black executive directors that sat on Yes on 4. It was an amazing experience. I got to be around these amazing women, and these women really took me under their wing, and people took me under their wing and really started guiding me in my ED journey, which was really new because I've always just been boots on the ground. And I still am. So like, you know, me and Kat have like connected. I think we actually connected, like we were both halfway into 5051, but we didn't know that either of us were in there, even though we've organized together. Like they were coming in on the digital side and I was coming in on the organizing side. And, you know, I got a call one day that there was a little bit of like a showdown at a protest. And we're like, I think it was the January protest, which a lot of people don't talk about, because there was the February protest is where people really, 5051 really blew up. And got a call and I was like, you know, who is this 5051? What is this? So I had my team dig into it, and eventually, you know, we got involved. We started doing de-escalation locally. And when we started to see there was infrastructure gaps, we started helping provide that in trainings. Like one of the things is that as a Black woman, like even in leftist ecosystems, even in movement spaces, oftentimes we're told to sit down. We want you at the table for your face, but please don't speak. And I push back against that. I still to this day push back against that, you know. So like one of the things that I do is that I train people to have the skills and the capabilities to be able to organize, to be able to absorb people, to know what to do with mutual aid, like understand the importance of mutual aid and Plan B, Plan C even. How to be anti-racist when you're mobilizing and you're sitting at a table with people that look like you, right? And then other people that look like me come to this table, right? And how do you balance that too? Because there's a balance to be had there. It's not just to say you have to listen to this person all the time, but like you also need to respect their lived experiences. So to say, you know, I grew up poor. I've gone through a lot of trauma too. And a lot of women I notice have come into this work because we've gone through trauma. Like something's happened to us directly and we're like, this isn't okay. But I don't think like it happens in the way like that moment that it happens. We're like, we're going to do this. And sometimes it might take, after we start processing that trauma, we're like, wait a minute, this doesn't just happen to me. This happens to everyone else. And that's like really when the rose colored glasses come off, you know, definitely when you're younger, like they take that, once you lose that, like you can't look back. And so it's a matter of, am I going to be hopeless about the situation or am I going to be helpless? And I refuse to be helpless in this moment. And 5051 is like this decentralized movement of like, we don't call it leaderless, like it's a leaderful movement, like all the way down to the county, city levels. All of these amazing, beautiful people are consistently organizing. And like, I can't take claim over that, but what I can say is that I like, anytime that they've come to me, I'm here to be there for them. Just like I know Kat is here to be there for them as well. These are feisty, young, new organizers, and we just need to give them the tools to succeed. And that's why, you know, I think passing the baton and getting people ready to take on that baton, oftentimes movement leaders burn out between 3 to 5 years. People say it takes 7 to 10 years to become a movement expert. So when are we passing that baton and how we're passing it? It's incredibly important in this moment.
Incredible. Thank you both so much. I'm so excited to be here with you both. we obviously have a lot to dig into and talk about. And, I think, Sarah, like you said at the beginning, I often sit at home just wondering, like, fam, are we cooked? Like, there's a lot happening. And I loved what you said about feeling hopeless but not helpless. And we know that a lot of people are warning that fascism might be coming, but at the same time we know, it's already here, and naming it without that fear matters. We were very deliberate about naming it in the name of this event, in the materials for this event, and in this discussion. And we know that these policies that we're seeing, this sort of takeover that we're seeing of our democracy, is going to impact and is impacting first and hardest, right? Immigrants, Black, brown, disabled, queer, trans, and working class communities. And of course, women in all of these different ways and in all of these different communities. So I want to start by sort of zooming out and talking about, how do we begin to untangle the legacies of white supremacy, sexism, oligarchy, and autocracy that are now taking shape? And, what is the real big tent agenda that we need to make sure nobody is left behind? And whoever wants to kick it off can.
I guess I will kick it off. Yeah, so right now we're living in a moment where fascism, this thing that is kind of been abstract to most people, and I say that to most people because it's very important to acknowledge that there are people in America, namely Black, Indigenous, and people of color, who have been living under fascism for a very long time. It's really kind of only new to those of us with the privilege that our white skin color has afforded us. Um, and so now many people are waking up, and we're seeing, anti-trans legislation, voter suppression, book bans, and even the normalization of political violence. But we cannot understand that all without understanding that it's fueled by something so much deeper, and that's racial capitalism, a system where profit literally depends on racial hierarchy, extraction, and control. And and when we think about it like that, we have to think about the economic systems that prioritize corporate wealth and white supremacy as well. And that's why we see billion-dollar bailouts for banks while Black and brown communities can't get clean water or affordable housing. It's basically socialism for the rich, and then screw everybody else, and especially the Black and brown people. And these solutions that were sold, like diverse representation in boardrooms or Congress, whether it's getting a Democrat in, or representation through racial identity or religion, or any other identifiers, that's not enough, because we've seen that representation without transformation of the system is still upholding the status quo. So we really need structural change here, not token change. And naming this crisis clearly, naming it as fascism, and then also looking at the systems of white supremacy that have founded this fascism, is really the first step towards building something better. And I think it's really the biggest thing that I think is like the biggest eye opener that I can think of, is when Hitler was studying how to enact the Holocaust against the Jewish people in Germany and all over Europe. He studied Jim Crow laws. He studied racial segregation. He studied how Americans enslaved Africans. And American white supremacy is the model for Nazi fascism. So these things that we studied weren't ever so abstract and far away from us to begin with, even if you didn't have that lens where it was affecting you personally.
Absolutely.
I can add on to that, Carmen. I think it's important too to recognize that we all participate in white supremacy. Like, that's a huge thing. And it's something like, even me as a Black woman, we participate in it because we were we grew up in it, right? I saw a video recently, and she was like, if you speak French in front of a baby over and over again, that baby's going to wind up speaking French, right? So like, we all have to recognize that, like, that's the first thing, is like really taking a look at ourselves. How are we being complicit in this moment? And then also recognize that like we need to talk to people about what fascism is. One of the classes that we teach is like, what is fascism? What are the 3 different things that like consist of fascism, which is ultranationalism, scapegoating marginalized people, shutting down the free press. A lot of people have like a 7th grade educational level, even if they graduated high school, right? So like, how do we make it bite-sized to them to wake them up? Like, how do we get that information that Kat has in their head about like how the Nazis took their ideas from Jim Crow, right? Having those history lessons is incredibly important, definitely at a time that they're banning books and they're trying to erase history. So like really taking a step back, I think like that's the answer, is taking a step back. Okay, we're in this moment. It is fascism. This is why it's fascism. How are we complicit in this moment? Because we all are to an extent, you know? And how do we make ourselves better, right? I was taught as like, I grew up in the South, we clean up our front yard, our backyard first before we go start pointing at someone else's house. We gotta keep our house clean, right? So like cleaning out our house, and that's why like the anti-racist training is really important that I've done. Cleaning out our house, staying leveled in the moment. And then from there, really breaking down what they're doing and why they are doing it, and having community conversations like with each other, and even people that are like sitting on the fence. Like, as much as we want to go and fight them, which I feel that deeply, we need to pull some of them over and be like, hey, I know you don't realize this, so let's have the conversation. And definitely people that can utilize their privilege, them utilizing their privilege in that moment to have those conversations. So queer, LGBTQI, Black, BIPOC people don't have to have those conversations, but like I know for me, like where I live, I'm willing to have those conversations sometimes. And right now, like we are in a scary moment, and like we are like, it is fascism, but I feel like we're like our hands on the doorknob, right? Like, and always once we open the door, it's like, what do we do then? So how do we stop that hand from opening the door? And how do we pull off some of the tentacles, right? We're not going to be able to change everything overnight. And I think that we have to be realistic with ourselves in this moment. We're not going to wake up and be able to destroy fascism and white supremacy. This is going to take I'm sure my grandchildren will be working on it. It's like, how do we keep building those building blocks so that what's happening now doesn't ever happen again?
Absolutely. And, that brings me to sort of this idea of what is the antidote, and a lot has been said. Like when I mentioned big tent politics before, a lot has been said after both elections of Trump, and right now in this moment, a lot is being said about big tent politics, usually by white men who are using that term to basically say, oh, we need to stop worrying about abortion. We need to stop worrying about everyone else's rights in order to win this political game, win the next election, seeing it in those very sort of very narrow terms of what a real victory here would be. So I'm curious what the two of you see as like the antidotal agenda that we need right now. What is the big picture vision of what we can offer people in this moment, right? When we have these conversations of like, this is what it could look like, because I feel like we're also in this moment where we are so defeated. So I'm just curious, what is the vision? And then after that, we can totally start digging into what's possible right now. But in that like dream space, what is the agenda that we should be working towards, and we should have the generations behind us working towards, that really does meet this moment?
I think for me, it kind of begins with a vision that looks a little bit more like we see in some of the Nordic countries, something more like democratic socialism, politics that says housing, healthcare, education, and care work aren't luxuries but rights. A framework that doesn't just focus on who's in power, but how power is built and shared. And I think we're seeing those kinds of models center the unpaid and the underpaid and the overlooked labor, like raising children, elder care, emotional support. And those are the things that keep communities alive and healthy. And the work is infrastructure. It absolutely deserves investment and respect. And yeah, so for me, I think the future that I'm dreaming of looks a little bit more like democratic socialism.
And what about you, Sarah?
That's honestly a hard one. My ancestors have been dreaming for so long. And I think that for me, it's like equity and equality and just letting people live and be their best versions of themselves. And I think that that's what my ancestors have been fighting for a very long time. And I'm still on their journey more than I'm on my own, if that makes any sense. So even when you asked, I was like, Kat, go first in my head. I was like, because I don't know how to answer this. So I'm glad Kat went first. Yeah, I'm not sure, honestly, like it's really hard to trust any system, to be completely fair. And it's really also hard when we think about like anarchy, like how that would also shake down for Black and brown people, right? And then you want to believe in democracy, but we watch how that also shakes down for Black people and brown people. And I feel like there's just a better way generally, but I don't, I'm not, I mean, I'm politically savvy, but I don't have all the answers. And if I did, I would probably give all my answers very loudly all the time. But I don't. I know right now it's a fight for survival. And I just want people to survive and be able to take care of their children, to be able to access healthcare, to be able to have good schools so that children that live in poverty can find their path out of poverty, to be able to have safe schools so that I don't have to worry about my 4 and 6 year old dying in a school shooting when I take them to school.
Mm.
To be able to read what books they want to read in a school library. And it's so crazy because these are basic minimum things. And I'm like, big dream is just to like have a small piece of the America I was taught existed when I was 7 years old, saying the Pledge of Allegiance. And like, I meant it. I meant it when I said it. I want to go back to that moment when I thought everything was okay. So that would be my biggest dream.
That's really beautiful. And, all of this sounds, even in those minor, like everyday ways, right? It sounds like the kind of radical change that we need. And yet we also know, the mainstreaming of political movements over the last many decades, from feminism to economic justice, has kind of left us unprepared to meet this moment, right? There's a lot of organizing that happens from within, petitions, bills, lawsuits, policy change. All of that feels like a very remote possibility when we have an administration that's not listening to feedback, elected officials that, we feel like we should probably have an opposition party, but instead we have lawmakers who keep saying, I need to play by the rules, as the other side is just bulldozing the rules entirely. Um, and you're both leading these like next generation movements, right? Using new techniques, um, or maybe not even new techniques, but using techniques that build new systems, right? And bring people into those new systems. And so I'm curious, what do you feel needs to change about the way we do the work that we do as advocates, as activists in this moment and moving forward? What do we need to do differently to move, beyond petitions and statements, and sort of sow the seeds that we can sow right now?
Yeah, I can go first, Kat, if that's okay. I think I want to say something like more to like the politicians is like stop looking at those polls. Stop. Because abortion rights, that was a winning issue. That was a
Mm.
winning issue and they fumbled. Even with Florida, we got 57%, which was a higher rate than Donald Trump got in the state of Florida. It is obviously a winning issue. I think the one of the other things is like they need to come to the table with the movement leaders and movement organizers and not with demands, but how they can show up, right? And I think we have to stop operating in silos. Everything is intersectional. What can happen to me can happen to Ricky in some kind of way, or Mary Beth or Steven. Like how do we show up for one another, right? Like, and also like making sure that we're actually uplifting marginalized voices. And in my organization, what we say is like not uplifting the most marginalized voice, we say the most impacted person in the moment. So
Mm.
who is the most impacted person in the moment or the situation? And that's who's getting uplifted, ED or not, executive director title or not. Like that's not, I follow suit of the person that's going to be impacted the most. So really taking that in, having new organizers recognize that like the people that have done this before, they have some skin in the game, right? But also having those older organizers that have done it for so long recognize that they didn't have it all right, or we wouldn't be in the position that we're in, right? So how do we both come to that table and like share these ideas and both feel respected, respected for the time that older organizers have put in and respected for the new ideas that new organizers have, right? Um, I think there needs to be a lot of conversation. We often don't, we're always on in the last 8 years, 10 years, I would say 12 years even, because if we really go back to it, I could dig. I'm not going to back into all the other bad legislation, but we've always been on the defense. We stay on the defense. You stay on defense, you're never gonna score. You might score here and there, but we're always on the defense. We need to get on the offense, right? And what this administration in this moment is doing is literally sending us a million different things to wake up and have anxiety about. We have to be focused and we have to be laser focused. And there are points and times that lawyers can do that job, right? Like, yes, we should go maybe do one protest or something, but lawyers can do this job, right? And then organizers need to focus on this part of it. I believe it's like a three-prong approach. Same thing with mutual aid. We give out Plan B and OPIL. So until we're able to restore abortion rights in Florida, and I will keep fighting for that, we have to give people access to that, right? And, we talk about an economy of our own, like people can't afford Plan B. So you know what? We give it out for free. We hide it in bathrooms and bar bathrooms, like no judgment, girl, take this, or person, take this, whatever you need to do. Right. So like supporting each other in this moment too. And be it like an organizer needs groceries, like it's such small things that could really push someone to keep organizing, to keep fighting. Like I said, 3 to 5 years is burnout for organizers. And like why they burn out is mental health. Some of them trigger word, commit suicide. Some of them have health issues. Some of these people can't afford to organize. So how do we give all those things to them? And also uplifting those grassroots organizations and organizations like this in this moment, like by donating, right? Not just the institutional donations, but like, or donating to institutional groups, but like donating to the small people that are doing things like this, that 5051's doing, that Voices is doing, because they're the ones that are actually on the ground and not being staff heavy with 20 staff, one person that just teaches someone how to communicate, but people that are actually like getting out in the streets when we're called and we're needed. And also like training each other. If you have some knowledge that I don't have, I need to be sitting there. One of the things that I say often to my team, and something that I believe deeply in, is that I am not the smartest person in the room. And if I am the smartest person in the room, I'm the most dangerous, because that's where you make a mistake. So putting our egos to the side to this moment, recognizing that politicians need to come to the table to us, not vice versa. And we have to stop defending politicians that are not good for us at this moment. We have to. It's not, we have to really put our foot down. And I think, unfortunately, that happened. And now I'm hoping that people are seeing that, like, they have to have progressive stances. We've made it clear. We've made it point blank period. We made it clear. And we're actually like not reaping the benefits, but the opposite of reaping the benefits of making that clear. But I think moving forward, I hope that people recognize that we don't have to stand behind someone that does not have the same values as us. I hope that answered the question. I feel like I went on a tangent.
No, I loved that. Thank you so much. And Kat, I'm just wondering if you have anything to add about sort of how we need to do this work differently, do politics and do activism differently in this moment and beyond.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about what Sarah said about, survival, about how, that's been Sarah's focus, and I think that that's something that we can really learn about too, because every day marginalized communities and people are developing creative survival strategies, mutual aid networks, community gardens, cooperative childcare, informal economies, buy nothing, or barter groups, and these strategies are not just for survival. They're allowing people to live with dignity in a system that often neglects or harms us. So they're not just temporary fixes or band-aids. They're seeds of a new world, one that's rooted in care and cooperation and our shared prosperity instead of through extraction. And when we organize around these issues, like these strategies around, for example, like food sovereignty, we're not just feeding ourselves, we're reclaiming control over what we eat and how it's grown. We're building ecological sustainability, we're building community, we're resisting corporate agriculture. When we build mutual aid networks, we're not just sharing resources, we're creating alternatives to capitalist individualism, we're forging community resilience, we're practicing solidarity economics. When we form tenant unions, we're not just protecting the residents, we're modeling effective collective ownership and power that challenges landlordism and these profit-driven housing markets. And these practices really can show us a new way, a transformative world, and what a new economy can look like, one that's centered on human needs and our environmental health and our collective survival. And I think these are the blueprints for transformation that we need to study and learn from, because for a long time we've been organizing within the system, relying on petitions and bills and lawsuits and policy change to make progress. But the system that was like barely functioning before just totally isn't right now. It's the current administration and the elected officials aren't listening. They're not even paying attention to the law or the constitution. And so I think we have to move beyond these traditional organizing mechanisms and really be bold right now. We need bold local action, and we need to follow the lead of those who have been on the front lines resisting fascism. So it's time to listen to the Black and Indigenous and people of color leaders that are in our community. It's time to not just pay lip service and to go do the work with people that have been on the front lines for so long, because we have so much to learn. And namely that change isn't going to come from asking politely or waiting for permission. It's going to come from people building power together in our neighborhoods, and organizing for change, creating these alternative systems, and showing solidarity across our movements, because they are all interconnected. And when we do that, we're going to disrupt business as usual. We're going to demand the world that we deserve. And our survival really, our liberation really depends on this acting together and not settling for less than transformative change, because it would be so easy to fall back into the system now if we get a Democratic president in a couple years. And is that really going to be the transformative change that we want to see? And I think it's going to also require, like Sarah said, not working in silo, because these allied groups and organizations, we've kind of just been doing our thing on single issues, and we can't do that anymore. We need the collective power. There's 340 million Americans in the country. So imagine if we all stepped up and came together and acted as one. And I think the boycott against Disney was the first time that I really saw that mass participation, the way I've been hoping to see, the way that we see, so easily done in Italy through their solidarity for Gaza. We have a kind of a lot to break through, because there's so much privilege and comfort for many Americans. But I think when we start to look at the ways that people have been resisting and transforming their communities through these alternative systems, I think that's where we're going to find the answers. And then the last thing I want to say on this is that it's also really important not just to be out there and doing that in our community. It's also important to look at the ways that we're thinking about things and the language and the words that we're using, because things like a care economy, it's not like a buzzword. We're shifting the system. We're shifting the system from something that prioritizes profit to something that prioritizes care and human being. And so I think it's really important not just to be bold in our actions, but to be bold and to challenge ourselves in the ways that we're thinking and the words that we're using to describe things as well. This is the time to be courageous.
Absolutely. And, I want to take a second too, when you talk about, solidarity economics, care economy, how would you sort of define the differences between those models and what we have now?
Is that for me specifically,
Yes.
or Sarah, do you want to pipe in on there? Okay. Yeah, so right now our systems are all based on profit. They're based on the dollars that are coming in, and the capital that is exchanged in value for things. And we work for that capital, and it's extracted from us to profit the ultra billionaires at the top. And the new systems are more rooted on, I would say, like a horizontal approach instead of something that's going vertically from top to the bottom. Horizontal structures, you know, we're building to support one another. So, it means, you know, mutual aids. That means rides to appointments with your neighbors if you're sharing one car with the community. Childcare swaps, neighborhood check-ins, bail funds, um, kind of the systems that we can create outside that maybe aren't directly linked to a value exchange that we have in the understanding of in our current capitalist systems. So it might mean you're helping out your neighbor more. It might mean you're buying extra because you have a little bit more. um, it's just shifting the thinking from one of personal profit or company profit into community wealth.
Absolutely. And, you know, when we think about sort of these alternative models, and, you know, when we talked about, like, Sarah, you talked about mutual aid, and breaking down those silos, and Kat, you talked about, you know, solidarity economics, care economies, you know, these are um, big big visions in terms of how we bring them to life. But how can we sort of start doing that? All of us, you know, everyday people at home in this moment where challenges can be also a moment that's the most ripe for broad change, right? So, what are the liberatory practices that we can all integrate into our lives or make real in our communities that will usher in, you know, that big, bold agenda that we do need, that we need to carry forward from this moment, even if, like you said, Kat, even if, you know, there is, God willing, an election that changes the conversation we're having in the short term that we need to keep that long-term vision. So how can we start sowing those seeds like in our own everyday lives? Because I also feel like when people talk about mutual aid, when they talk about, you know, shared ownership and all of these sort of things, there's a philosophical space and then there's that practical space where a lot of times people bump up against it because of like privilege, convenience, just the way it's always been, the way I'm used to my life looking. So what are the changes that we should be making and the practices that we should be building?
You want to go or yeah? I think one of the things for there are a lot of powerful women that are out there leading this fight generally, and a lot of them, a good chunk of them are mothers, right? So like helping with childcare in that way, right? Like there are certain people that cannot go out and protest, don't have the stamina to go out there, not as long as like someone like me who can be out in the streets, or me and Kat, we're out in the streets in LA for hours, you know, having that peace of mind that your child is being taken care of, and no matter what happens that night that they're going to be taken care of, that's incredibly important. Also having a bail fund in this moment, like that's incredibly important for, like, if we're talking about feminism, right? Like there are a lot of feminists that are moms. There are some feminists that are not. But like, let's really get to, for me, I'm a mother. I have a 4 and a 6-year-old. So like, I can only afford to be out, um, and out, like if I'm arrested, like a day or two, right? Because then my house starts to fall apart. Let's be real. I have a 4 and a 6-year-old. They're terrorists. I need to be here for my son to do homework with them, right? And I always travel a lot anyways because like I'm very business oriented. I know where my fight is in this work. I'm always consistently being called to do panels or called to a protest that's across the country. So like every day I lose with my kid that I'm fighting this fight. And that's okay because I'm fighting for a world where my daughter can be as resilient and mouthy as she is, and my son can thrive and learn how to treat other people in a respectful way. Um, so those are two things. And I think even when it comes down, like when I see like people that are older than me, I'm 32, and like I look at their pictures of like all their friends getting together with their kids, there's somewhere, somehow we lost community. And I don't know where it is. And I really think about, like, I really try to like hyper focus on that and think about that sometimes, like even in my own family. It's like somewhere, somehow we stepped away. So how do we become a community again that we can lean on people like that? When I know that like Kat needs dinner, I'm gonna go bring them dinner because I saw all of you guys experience that. And it's like, you know, you see it on TV and it's just like, wow. Some of our friends, we have small little groups of friends now that are in their 30s, that will okay, I'll send you an Uber Eats gift card. Sometimes they'll come bring something, but like having that community is incredibly important. So just like having community events, and like not even community events, like making real lasting friendships that you do feel I do feel comfortable dropping off my kid. I can honestly say 100%, like if Kat was in town, I would feel comfortable leaving with them with my kid, right? But that's not to say I have a lot of people like that. My mom's passed away. I don't have siblings. I'm like on my own. Um, so those are just two things. And the bail funds, again, people are getting arrested left and right. We know tomorrow they're going to come down with another. I don't know if it's going to be a EO or what's going to happen, but there's supposed to be the whole big to do tomorrow. And like activists are very afraid, but people aren't giving up. So like making sure, and also there are a lot of nonprofits that are afraid to have bail funds because they don't want to be targeted too. So like we have to figure out how to navigate that moment and make sure that people have access to bail funds so that they don't sit in jail, they don't miss work, right? Um, I don't know how you said it on the video, screwnomics, but like, like you can't afford to miss work in this moment in time. You can't afford to miss work if you have a kid that's sick at home, let alone you can't afford to miss work if you've been protesting, right? So like that could really destroy someone's life. And they're still out there. They know, and if they get fired and they are found out that they got arrested. So the quicker you get them out, the less likely it is that they can get they can get in more trouble. Those are just like two ideas.
Absolutely. And Kat, anything to add?
Yeah, I would say, if there's anything that we can leave you with, I would really want to just encourage people that, now is the moment to like start claiming your power, because each and every one of us has so much power, and there's a way for everybody to get involved in the resistance and in building this transformative world that we want to see. So in order to do that, we need you to be healthy. That's the first thing. Whether that's, taking care of your physical activity, start lifting weights. You never know when you may need to pick up a heavy bottle of water pack or some, supplies. You never know when you might need to be out on your feet for a protest, or, just as physically prepared as you are able to be. There's ways to start building power in your community too. You can start a community backyard garden. You can check in with your neighbors, see if maybe they're having trouble getting rides to their medical appointments, or maybe they're always home all day and they're bored and they would be a good person for the community to turn to if they needed childcare. It starts with having these conversations in our local community. And beyond that, some people are able to do a little bit more, like community defense. And in that case, and hello from my kitty. Yeah, some people, are able to go around with their phone and document what's happening outside of the immigration court, or, hanging out. Maybe you're just going to go hang out by your Home Depot with your phone and some know your rights cards. Community defense is really important too for those who feel able to do that. But there's really something for everybody, even just sharing, educational information, um, talking, posting online. There's making art. There is literally an infinite ways to get involved in the movement. And there's a place for everybody, but it really does start with ourselves. So make sure you are okay first. And if you need any therapy, cats are wonderful.
Thank you. Um, and at this point, I'm going to take some questions that were submitted by our attendees on Eventbrite. Um, and I'll also, if there's questions coming in the chat, I'll work on bringing those in as well. And so, a few people in their questions, there were some major buckets in the questions that people submitted. So a lot of people have the same questions. And one is basically, how do I prioritize? Where do I begin? There are all these options. There are all these ways to make a difference. There are all these things that we're being asked and called to do in this moment. I feel like, especially if your social media feed looks anything like mine, it's like there isn't enough time in the day to do all of the different things that people are offering up or asking, calling people to do. So I'm curious, in how would you all respond to that inquiry of like, where do I start? I feel overwhelmed. I feel frozen. I feel powerless. Where do I begin? Sort of getting involved in building, being part of this different way of organizing and being.
Yeah. So one of the things I do is I call it an ecosystem check. Always check to see what the organizations are doing around you before like you go out and start a new one, or before you decide, you're gonna run this program. Um, and a lot of times you'll either find someone that's doing it the way that you like it, and there are times that you like with voices, you then will start your own, right? If you are frozen and hopeless in this moment, I would advise taking a step back before stepping in and breathing, and also like making sure that you're taking care of yourself. Self-care is an act of political warfare. And like we don't talk about that enough in these spaces. It's like go, 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 organize, 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 but you can't organize if you're dead. Like you can't organize if you're depressed. You can't organize if you've lost hope and you're helpless. You can't organize. So if you feel those ways that you named, then you need to take a step back and do something. That means you probably already have been organizing, right? And you're like, you're just running all over the place. Do something that you would have done, that do something that you love that you were doing before November. That's what I encourage all of my organizers to do. Find that one thing that you love that you haven't done since November. And then I want you to ask your friends if they've done that one thing that they love since November, because you are now setting a bad example by not doing the things that you love. And I feel like I saw some little smiles and smirks. I know that means I'm calling y'all out too. And that means that for all of you as well. And for me too. Um, and then the second thing is ecosystem check, take care of yourself, like act of political warfare, because the moment they win is the moment when you're tired, you're exhausted, and you give up. Um, Find out what makes your heart happy. Is it chanting? For me, I used to love to chant. I can chant really loudly. I'm really good at it. I don't like chanting anymore. I like safety and de-escalation. Like I'd rather do safety and de-escalation, so I put on a vest. Find what makes your heart happy, because we have to find moments of joy in this. Because if not, like we lose hope again. Um, and also look at the most impacted people around you and see why and how they're being impacted, and ask them what you should do. It's one thing to ask all of us on a call,
Mm,
but you need to talk to your community, because I don't know what city you're in. I don't know who you're talking to. I don't know what orgs you're related to. I can't give you that answer. I could give you like a roundabout answer, but ask them how you can show up for them in this moment. So that is my advice there. Take care of yourself first and foremost.
incredible. Kat, anything to add?
I really feel like I can't, that like just everything Sarah said.
Perfect. And some of the other questions that we got submitted in advance were about community. And we live in such an isolated time. We're seeing sort of this really dangerous escalation of what's happening out there, but so many of us are still sort of, living behind a screen, um, in a loneliness epidemic, right? In-person relationships right now, as we've touched on again and again in these different responses and questions, are such a critical part of this. They can be life-changing, right? They can be life-saving. So how can folks start building that sort of supportive community or tap into one? How can they come together to protect the most vulnerable people in their communities? How does someone sort of take that jump from not really being able to tap into community to finding it and nurturing it?
I would say, for me, when I was first trying to figure out, where I fit in and things, is I literally just looked around. I read the news articles that was in my local paper. I went and walked around some public spaces, and it became pretty apparent very quickly who the most impacted in my community were. And from there, I just found out who the organizations were that were trying to tackle that issue, and I plugged myself in there. So for me, if I were starting out in a new community, I would try and figure out who's the most impacted, and then figure out how you can use your unique skills to support the efforts.
Absolutely. Sarah, anything to add or you're good to Okay, perfect. And Stephen, you asked in the chat, how can we influence and educate and talk to the men in our lives about the disconnect between fascist patriarchy and what's actually going to be healing and good and healthy for men. And a lot of the questions we got on Eventbrite were very similar. It was about communication. And I know, Sarah, you talked about this, but Kat, obviously you do a lot of communicating as well. Just this idea of, how do we, some of us on this Zoom might be the only ones in our friend group or our community or our families, right? Freaking out or just feeling the pressure of what's happening or being really aware of what's happening and how dangerous it is. How do we wake people up around us to what's happening? How do we better communicate what's dangerous about what's happening right now? How do we respond to, like you said, Sarah, before, like the people on the fence or even the hardcore, like hardline misinformed MAGA believers when we encounter them or when they confront us? How do we have conversations across lines of difference about what's happening? Just sort of how do we break out of the discomfort of not wanting to talk about it, and have those important conversations?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be honest. Well, definitely when it comes to men, stop cooking for them, stop having sex with them, don't do anything for them, make them fold their clothes, wash their laundry. I'm not doing anything for you. If you are going to sit there and I'm dating you and you're my partner and you're not going to understand, then you have nothing, you need nothing from me. You got it all figured out. You have all the answers. You are the smartest person in the room. And that means you're also the most dangerous, or I am at that moment in time, to be very, very clear. But on realistically, I think it's about there's two sides to this. One thing is we can't force people into this, right? We can't force people into this moment. We want to, but think about all of you that are sitting here. If you were forced into this work and you didn't want to do it, you would half-ass your job, and we don't need anyone right now. Half-assing your job would be incredibly dangerous. You wouldn't be as passionate as you are. We need those people that are going to fight, right? So it's like kind of pushing them into the conversation, asking them what they care about, listening to them. That's going to be the hardest thing, definitely men, because you're just like, I know that you are so wrong, but you have to listen to them. You got to give them a little bit, right? So listen to them and then make sure that you come prepared for the conversations. And then outside of that too, we have to recognize something I did during the abortion rights, like the 6-week abortion ban passed in Florida. We had just flown down. I think I was one of the first groups to march at the Supreme Court justices' houses. So we had just flown back. And I remember sitting at the bar with my friends, and they were like talking about who was doing who, like they were just talking about all the little tea and drama. And I'm like, do you guys not understand? Do you guys, like, I was getting really upset. And it became an issue that they wouldn't hang out with me because all I was talking about was abortion, abortion, abortion. And then I had this moment that I was like, wait a minute, I'm fighting for them to have a regular life. Like, that's what I'm fighting for. So I can't disrupt their life all the time because they don't understand or see it from my perspective. Now, here's the thing. When I stopped doing that, and I would bring it up when they asked me what I was doing, and I would tell them all these amazing things, or I posted it on Facebook, right? I'm in recovery, and there's something we say, it's not promotion, it's attraction, right? Eventually people are like, oh, how can I help with your backpack drive? Now you want to get involved. Oh, I'm upset now because this is now impacting me. Great. We can sit down and have the conversation of how it always has been impacting you and how it should not have waited until it impacted you. But now we're glad to have you in the fight, right? And also for like my queer and like BIPOC people, like we see like Black women straight up saying, I'm tired, right?
Mm.
I'm fighting for you guys. Your ancestors are calling you to take a nap, and girl, take that nap. My ancestors are calling me to pick up the torch, and I'm running with it, right? And that's okay. So it's really like a balance, right? And it's really also like we have a way of intellectualizing a lot of things, and like because we're all very smart, right? We will sit down and be like, the fact that your eyes are not open is very frustrating. That we have to be empathetic because that's what the other side does. They slam and slap them down, and they're like, if you don't agree with us, you're this. If you don't agree with us, you're anti-American. If you don't agree with us, you're this. We're not. That's why, like, in the most respectful way, women are way better people, and I don't understand how we haven't had a woman president yet because we're the most empathetic creatures. It's just realistic. That we can utilize that empathy and that softness sometimes. And sometimes you're gonna have to be really stern with your friends. And sometimes you lose those friends. So you really have to weigh that out. Like, I'm not gonna sit there and send you into the tiger's den. I can't consciously do that. There's 3 different ways you can handle it. If it's your partner, get a new partner. If it is your friend, maybe try to have more conversations and like try to see where their brain's coming from. And it might be, I love the screwnomics word. I did not know, and I need to read that now. I'm buying that book after this. It might be that they really ultimately can't afford to get out there in the streets, but they might bake cookies. They might bring a pack of water. They might go out and flyer. They may go to the next event. They may donate, right? Everyone has their way. So figure out what's the best way to get them to come in. And honestly, as we all know, activism is a trap. You say that you're just going to be a protester, and then you become an organizer once you really get your foot in the door. It's all a trap. So once we get the foot in the door, like everything else, the universe just kind of pushes them along. We just have to get them there. So that is my feedback on that.
Wonderful. Yes, activism as the gateway drug that we need in this moment. Thank you, Mary Beth, for dropping the link to Screwnomics. And I also want to shout out that Mary Beth dropped the link to WILF US in the chat. It's an organization that you can connect with, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom US section. And someone else also a little bit back talked about take back the power to create money for the public good by organizing for public banks. So the Public Banking Institute is also an organization to look out for if you want to get involved in that area as well as the fight. And Kat, I'm curious if you have any other communication tips, tricks, calls to action.
I got one for this, and this is the same exact advice that I used in the resistance toolkit, which I'll drop in the chat. And I developed this toolkit to help prepare communities that were facing federal occupation resist. And what the psychology shows is that when we're facing any kind of a loyalist, whether that's a military loyalist or a citizen loyalist, antagonizing that person is only going to further their loyalty. What helps shift their loyalty is challenging them with respect. So when we're facing men, when we're facing, the National Guard in our communities, it doesn't matter what it is, yelling at them, spitting at them, calling them names, whatever is not going to help. It's actually going to hurt because they're just going to harden their loyalty to the regime. When we can, with respect, challenge them, say, for example, if it was a National Guard and I was faced with them, I would say, is this what you signed up to do, sir? A gentle challenge, that sort of thing. And I think we can take that same approach when we're talking to our grumpy uncle at Thanksgiving dinner or whatever it is. These kinds of, with respect, just kind of planting the seeds. And then, like Sarah says, we can't force anybody to get involved in the movement or to change their minds. So gently planting the seeds is really the way to go. And I urge everybody that has privilege to wield that and to stay in the lives of people that are on the other side, because it will take people planting those seeds. If we completely abandon them, they're not going to hear any of the logic or any of the empathetic arguments or, any of the truth that's happening that the media isn't showing them, that maybe we're tuned into because we're seeing the social media reports. So challenging with respect, and then also celebrating when there is a loyalty shift, because the more we can celebrate it and make it like, we don't want to have those "I told you so" moments. That's not the right vibe. When somebody is opening their mind and shifting their loyalty away from the fascist regime, we want to celebrate that. We want to encourage that, and that will help encourage more shifts as well.
Absolutely. And I'm like wondering, okay, really quickly before our final question, one of the last big buckets from Eventbrite was about staying sane, right? So the people in power, obviously right now, they want us confused. They want us overwhelmed. They want us downtrodden, resigned, compliant. How do we, Sarah, you touched on self-care as a really radical act here. How Kat and Sarah both, how do you maintain equilibrium, right? How do you take care of yourselves? How do you navigate the stress of how much is happening, the bombardment that we're getting at all times of just, absolutely bonkers and awful, cruel stuff happening, feels like every minute of every day. How do you to take care of yourselves and sort of make sure that you are staying strong in that way, resilient in that way?
Yeah, I as much as like I'm here like chatting it up, like it's really hard. Like it's not an easy thing. It You have to remind yourself. I had like downloaded this little app called Appy, and it's a bird and it reminds me to drink water. I know that sounds really silly, but like these are things you forget to do. Like definitely when it becomes your job, like eat, sleep, drink water, like all of those things are hard sometimes. Um, I also have some days I'll delete my Facebook off my phone just like for a day or two, like not something I'm gonna miss anything big, but like to take that moment and take that step away, right? Sometimes I'll just leave my phone at home when I go for a walk or I go spend time with my kids. The phone is a blessing and a curse because like we're so hyper connected to what's happening. Um, and it's like something that we can just immediately go through and we go through it out of habit. Um, and there's just so much trauma there right now. Let's be real. So like taking a step away and remember that like it goes back to remembering that you're like fighting for these moments with the people that you love. You're fighting for those moments with your kids. You're fighting for those moments with your friends. Like don't let them take that away. They're taking everything else away. Don't let them take that moment away. Like, and that's like a reminder and recognizing like, you know, Kat talked about working out. That's been a big one for me. It's just like I do safety and de-escalation. Like I have to be like, you know, I have to be able to run sometimes, which is a lot. Um, but like, you know, taking that out, like having that time where your brain just turns off, like, how am I going to finish the next like 10 steps, right? How am I going to finish the next sit-ups or like whatever weight challenge that I'm deciding to do? How am I going to finish that? Cooking food, like that's something that I love to do because it's like I'm really Southern. And so like we don't use measuring cups very often. And like you just have to like taste test things and seeing my friends eat that food. So I mean, everyone has their different things that they do, but it's like reminders, right? Like I have it written in my agenda, like take time to do this, take time for my family, take time to do even laundry. Reminders not to forget to do the basic things, and reminders that it's okay to step away. It's okay to take a break. I often say in the movement, the 50-51 movement, that if the movement burns down because you've been gone for 48 hours, then the movement was never meant to be. Like you're allowed to take a step back and you need to have rotating leadership, and that's incredibly important. Um, if you're running like a chapter from Indivisible to 50-51 or any of those things, and you are the main one with all the keys, then that's a problem and you're going to get burnt out. And we have to avoid burnout at all costs. We have to share that leadership and like put our egos aside because we're going to need help too. And also the biggest thing is ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. It's not embarrassing.
Absolutely. Kat, anything you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, everything that Sarah said, plus, plus, plus. I will say for kind of the flip side to people, maybe you're not the leader of your Indivisible chapter or a 50-51 chapter, maybe you haven't quite taken an active role just yet in the resistance. And I would say that in that case, you know, once you're okay, once you're centered and healthy, getting involved, action can be a very effective antidote to despair. I know I wake up every day and I read, you know, whatever 15 horrible new things popped up while we were sleeping. But then instead of despairing about it, I get to work and I do something about it. And I'm surrounded by other people who are taking inspirational action. And, you know, people that I'm learning from, like people like Sarah, like people that have so much value to give and insight and wisdom and camaraderie too, the community that we're building in this resistance that feeds and fuels me too. So yeah, take care of yourself, and you know, if you're doing a lot already, manage your burnout. But if you're not quite in the game just yet, find your way to get involved, because that is for me the best form of like mental wellness for me, is knowing that I am fighting this, that we're not hopeless, that hope and change is on the horizon, as well as amazing community of people who are together. We're birthing a new world.
Absolutely. And, you know, when we talk about, you know, this new world and making sure that we, you know, we've touched on the importance of like having a radical vision that's really not just about what's happening right now, but is just grounded in what should have been happening all along, right? Like the really transformative change that we need. And I know we touched on this a little bit before, but I kind of just wanted to close on that hope and that vision and that inspirational idea of what could be possible, you know, by putting some of the strategies we've talked about into practice. People will not only be laying the groundwork to survive, right? But to build that new world on the other side of it. So I'm curious, really quickly, just what both of you believe or hope that that new world looks like. Kat, do you want to start?
For me, I think we're working towards a world in which people everywhere are liberated, and nobody is under the thumb of an oppressor, where nobody is experiencing apartheid, where there's no genocide, where everybody has enough food. I mean, we're trying to build the American dream that we were promised, but was a lie the whole time. Yeah, liberation for all. And I think when I say all, I don't mean just human beings, I also mean animals and the planet. um and I think we've got a lot of different points of view on how to liberate people and animals and the planet, but it's really about wellness. It's really about freedom and liberty and justice. And so that's why I'm saying it's kind of like the American dream that we were all promised that ended up being a scam. But yeah, liberation.
I love that, Kat. Just a plus one what Kat said. Um, Liberation and love. That's where we're fighting for. Like love, radical love can do so much. Like unconditional love, even for your neighbors that you want to fight on a regular basis. That unconditional love for yourself. That unconditional love for your comrades that are out in the trenches. And just to end it, there's two videos that I watch. One's Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, and he says that we were fighting for liberation, and someone responds to him is like, well, I thought we were fighting for peace, and he said, no, that's the white man's word. We're fighting for liberation. It's a really good video. And then it also reminds me, I think Nelson Mandela said this, in order for me to be free, my oppressor must be free. And like, so I'm fighting for my oppressor to be free and myself to be free at the same time. Because that's the only way path forward. I don't want to live in a world full of hate and tick and tax and we're attacking the other person. Like I want to live in a world that we're all equal and we can live, and my children can grow up in a world that like I don't have to worry about them getting pulled over by the police and killed and going to school and getting shot at school. And a world that my daughter doesn't have to feel like she has to sit down and be quiet, and she can be loud and obnoxious as she is right now as a 4-year-old. Um, and I love that for her. I want to create that space, not only for my kids but my great grandkids, and for everyone's, for us. So a world full of love. And I think that that's far out, and I think that humans have this innate ability to damage that. But I think if there's people like all of us that are on this call right now, we can continue to fix the damage as they create it.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much for being here, for making this conversation possible. We have a few extra minutes, so I'm curious to. I know I've been seeing some stuff about like the No Kings protests that are coming back on the 18th of October, but wanted to give you both any opportunities to, plug any upcoming events or activations that people can jump right in and start getting involved in before we close. Everyone, please scroll the chat before you hop off. There's so much incredible stuff in there from different organizations and their representatives in the chat, including the Alliance for Just Money doing a project with Wolf that's coming up. But yeah, I just wanted to see if there's anything coming up that you all want to touch on, plug, just encourage people to be active in.
Yeah, I think just follow. Kat has a lot of amazing, like they help run the digital team. I am not a digital team person. Follow 5051. There's a lot of call to actions in that space. Also, you'll happen to see either you follow 5051 or you can go subscribe to our email list for voicesoflorida.org, and or voicesofloridafund.org. That's our C3 and C4. I do a lot of different trainings, including anti-racist training, including organizing absorption and de-escalation and safety. And we're building, each of those classes are about 2 hours long. We have about 30 hours worth of curriculum officially built out. So you can come and start at any point in time. And again, as always, like I say to everyone, take care of yourself.
Wonderful. And Kat, anything from 5051?
Yeah, I don't have really anything. We've got, an email collection set up on the website. So if you'd like to receive updates from 5051, we can email you. And we are on all social media platforms except for X. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we're so sorry to be out of time. But please, everyone, join me in saying a big thank you to Kat and Sarah. Thank you so much also to everyone who's here for being here. Keep in touch with us at aneconomyofourOwn.org. Keep an eye out for our next newsletter, as well as you'll get an email on the Eventbrite side when the recording has been posted on YouTube. If you haven't perused our curriculum that was made by Ricky, we have sort of a living resource document that'll be up on our Medium blog, but it also got emailed to you as a PDF today as well from Eventbrite. So feel free to sort of connect in there and learn more with the resources in there. And keep in touch by following us on social media at Economy of Our Own everywhere. And yeah, just thank you so much, everyone, for being here, for making this happen. And thank you, Kat and Sarah, for taking the time to share your insight and your wisdom with us.
Thank you, Carmen, for hosting such an awesome panel.
Oh my God, thank you.
I appreciate all of you. And thank you, Mary Beth, for keeping the time. Even though I went over a couple times, I appreciate you. And Ricky,
It
thank
all
you for
worked
having
out.
me. Thank you guys, all of you. Yeah, that's all I have to say. I appreciate you guys. This was an amazing experience. And thank you, Kat, for connecting me to this amazing thing. Definitely needed it. It filled my cup up. So
Thanks for
Yeah.
joining me, Rusty Bestie.
we gotta find a new name for that. We gotta find a new name for that.
All right, fabulous. Bye, y'all, and thank you so much.
Bye.